What's going on, everybody? Welcome to After Prison Show. And today we get an opportunity to do something that I think we've only done this one time in the past, and that is interview a correctional officer. Now, folks, we have searched for correctional officers who would be willing to share their stories. And the fact of the matter is there's been more guards that we've talked to than we've actually featured here on After Prison Show. And the reason for that is because, just to be honest with you, sometimes, actually most all of the times, these guys have backed out. They haven't wanted to put out there, what they do for a living, who they are, and that's to be understood and respected. But this individual that I'm getting ready to introduce you guys to today is a really, really awesome person. A guy by the name of Cesar. Cesar was a correctional officer for 2 years down in the state of North Carolina, and even though he was only a guard down there for 2 years, this dude definitely has some really crazy stories to share, and he's just got a really energetic personality that I can't wait to introduce all of you to. And before even getting a chance to do this interview, it would be Cesar who reached out to me via email talking about the fact that he would be willing to share the stories of his experiences as a guard, which would lead to the phone call that me and Cesar would have. And it was hearing his voice and just the energy that he had over the phone that really made me want to share this man's story and his experiences even more. So folks, without further ado, I'd like to introduce all of you to Cesar, a man who was a correctional officer for 2 years, and the stories that he's getting ready to share with us. Cesar, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to talk with us today.
Yeah, no problem, man. Anytime.
Dude, it's awesome to have you rocking with the After Prison Show. And, we first got in contact through email. You would send me an email telling me a little bit about your story and the fact that you were a correctional officer.
Yeah, man. I've been rocking with After Prison Show when it was just you, and then Cody came along, and Dave had the long hair. And he had the broke leg, broke wing, he called them. And, yeah, man, I was a correctional officer in North Carolina for just a little under 2 years. And it was a hell of an experience, let me tell you.
Well, a couple of things real quick. You were an OG of After Prison Show going back to old broke wing and broke leg Dave. So it's definitely awesome to have you rocking with us and for as long as you have been. We would first begin talking on the phone just yesterday. And it was while I was talking with you on the phone that you just seemed like such a laid-back, cool individual. And I told you right as we started to do this Skype call that, dude, your voice doesn't even match your appearance at all because, dude, you're huge.
Yeah, man. I'm pretty laid back, not too much stuff bothers me. And, why worry about things that you can't change? I mean, if you can't change something, why worry about it, If you can't change the outcome, just let it rock, see what happens.
And that's a really good way of looking at things, a really good philosophy for life. It was while I was talking with you on the phone and realizing that you were such a laid-back individual, it kind of gave me a sense of what you potentially were like as you wore a guard. And if you would, talk about like the type of a guard that you considered yourself to be. Were you the hardcore by the book guy, or were you the guy who was a little more laxed? Where do you think that you were at?
Well, to be honest with you, man, when I first started, I was like 100% by the book, strictly by the book, because I didn't know any better, I thought things had to be a certain way and certain things had to be done certain things. So when I first started, I was 100% by the book. But every correctional officer will tell you this. While you're on the job, you end up learning how to do your own thing, your own style, basically your own swag on how you report with the other inmates and the other officers and how you are. Because when I first started, let's say we had to do a locker search, I would have the inmates sit on those plastic chairs that they have, and I would meticulously go through everything. And a locker search would take me half an hour, 45 minutes, all depending on how much stuff he had. But the more experience I had there and the more I learned the ropes and the more I learned, every person is different, every inmate's different, and every situation's different. So the more time I spent working in the office, in the prison, sort of changed the way I was, because at first, like I said, I was by the book, and then towards the end, I was a little bit more laid back. I wasn't as by the book. I was still by the book, but like I told you when we were talking on the phone, I would tell them all the time, you guys are going to do what you're going to do. You guys are going to smoke. You guys are going to tattoo. You guys are going to gamble. You guys are going to do whatever you want, man. You're in here more than me, But when I walk in the block, at least have some respect and don't throw it in my face like that. Don't do it straight in my face. If you're tattooing and you see me coming in or someone else 12 or blocks hot, at least put it away so I don't see it, so it's not so blatant, you know? And then when I leave, you know, go ahead and do your thing again.
You know, it certainly sounds like from the time that you became a correctional officer, you definitely weren't the dude that anybody wanted to get searched by. But as you would become more accustomed to what you were doing in there, you know, you did become more laid back. With your initial, I guess, beginning as a correctional officer, tell us, you know, where you were a guard at, but also tell us how it was for you when you first began to work there, when you were that rookie guard.
All right, so I was working in this prison called Correctional, and it's a processing camp. So you have anything from drunk drivers to people who don't pay child support to murderers, serial rapists, all these crazy things. And I'll send you some information about some inmates who were in there, and they were there for years, man, like double, triple life sentences, 100 years, 200 years. And my first day ever working in the prison, I go in and they had just finished up chow, the lunchtime, and I'm walking back. It was Pamlico dorm actually, to Pamlico dorm, and a fight broke out in between, in the Sally Port, and between two inmates, and they happened to be gay inmates, and they were just fighting my first day, and I didn't know what to do. You know what I mean? And the code was called. There was a code 4. The lieutenant ran out, and two other officers were there, and I go in there as well because I'm not going to let an officer get jumped on. So as we're all in there, they're spraying that OC spray, and that's rough. That OC spray, I don't know if you've ever been sprayed, but during correctional officer boot camp, we have to all get sprayed. And right away, the burning on the skin, the eyes, the nasals, everything starts going. And we break up the fight, but that was my first day ever, and there was a fight, and I just realized, I was like, wow, this is real, man. This is real.
And not to mention that it was two gay guys fighting, and that's the type of stuff that you'll see in prison. It's just another day in there, and it's just crazy it happens to you on your first day while being in there.
They were actually fighting for another inmate, like their boyfriend. It was two guys fighting over what they call girls.
That's my girl right there. Hey,
no, dude.
You looking at my girl over there? Hey, that's my girl. That's a man. Cesar, you would end up being a guard in this prison that you worked at. This was in North Carolina, correct?
Yeah. In Craven County.
You would work as a guard for almost 2 years. And, you know, you shared with me in the initial emails that we were writing that you saw all sorts of really crazy things while you were in there. You know, I'd ask that, you know, share with us some of the experiences or the more crazy experiences that, you know, you witnessed while being a guard.
This inmate, I forgot his real name, but they used to call him Big Bird because he was in a yellow jumpsuit and he was about like 7 feet tall. So the charges he had were those type of charges that you don't ever want to have in prison. Like, he was in for some wild stuff. I don't know if you want me to say it.
I can imagine, so we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, he was in some wild stuff, and he's going to court, right? And the judge tries to cop him a plea. He's like, yo, we'll give you 10 years to do the 10 years. And he's like, nah, I'm not doing double digits. I'm not doing double digits. So he takes it to trial, ends up losing, gets triple digits.
I've seen that happen myself. I saw a guy get a plea deal for 25 years, didn't take it, ended up with 200 plus years. So it's the chance that you take, and if you've got some messed up charges, you better be ready to expect what could happen if you get found guilty.
Yeah. As for fights, man, there was so many of them. In that prison, there's a fight a couple times a month, if not once a week. This one time, oh yeah, I told you this on the phone, but I'll show so everyone can hear it. So this inmate, he was, how do I put this? A real nuisance to deal with inmate. He always, for some reason, wanted to back talk. Oh, he thought he knew everything. So he had his New Balances. They were fresh pair of all white New Balances, and he had got them. And then a few days later, we noticed that he had colored them in with permanent marker to change the color of them. So by policy, you're not allowed to alter anything from its original form. So being that he changed the color, we had to take them away from him. So we're in the lieutenant's office, and he's causing a big mess about this, saying that they're his and whatnot. So he ends up giving up his sneakers and gets his shower shoes on. And he's in the lieutenant's office, and he's like, "Oh, Lou, the first person I see here, that's it. It's on site." So we go. He leaves, and me and the lieutenant are there kicking it with a sergeant. We're just kicking it or whatever, and then we hear code 4 in the walkway by the rec area. So I run out. Excuse excuse me. The sergeant runs out, and this dude is getting the brakes beat off him. He's getting whooped, man. And the crazy thing is, the dude had a cast covering from like the thumb up to here, and he's trying to hit the other inmate with the cast. And he hits him once, there's some blood or whatever. But we get there, me and the sergeant, this other officer get there, and they immediately stop the fight. They stop fighting because we tell them that we're going to spray them. So they immediately stop all the aggression right there.
And, real quick, just to reiterate what you're saying here, you shared this story with me yesterday, and this is just, it's pretty crazy. I've seen something similar happen myself, but here was a guy, you say he was just constantly getting in trouble, constantly wanting to backtalk the guards, always making trouble for himself. He had these shoes, he altered the shoes. You guys went to take the shoes away from him, and he says, that's it. First dude I see, it's, we're fighting. And he goes and attempts to fight somebody. It ends up being a gay dude, and this gay dude beat the brakes off of him.
Beat him up so bad. He was bloodied, man. Bloody.
Cesar, you would be a correctional officer for 2 years, and I can only imagine the list goes on in terms of the amount of stories that you could share with us. But one story I really want you to share with us is something you told me about yesterday involving your roommate who actually used to be a correctional officer as well. And this is going to bring up a really good point because I want to pose this question with this as well, and that is, talk about the amount of snitching by inmates that you saw in just a short amount of time that you were a guard.
Snitching, man. Dry snitching, or just straight up telling, like it's cool, man. I'll get to what you want to talk about in a second, but real quick, we'll walk into a dorm, right? And let's say they have a chomo in there and they don't like him, and they'll be like, "Yo, the chomo's got a shank," and just like that, just because they don't want him in the dorm, which is understandable in some ways, but but the story that I was telling you about, I'm not going to say his name, but this person, so he was working in a different prison, and allegedly the inmates were saying that he was bringing in contraband, cell phones, not cigarettes, loose tobacco, and marijuana. That's what the inmates were saying. So the inmate that supposedly was getting it wasn't the one that told on him. So what happened was another inmate got jealous because he wanted it on the action, because you know how it is in there. Cigarettes are $10, $20. Roll-ups, one cigarette, you can break it up into 3-4 cigarettes and sell it for a couple of dollars. And it's crazy because I've taken a few of these roll-ups and you open it up and it's nothing. There's no tobacco in it whatsoever. But yeah, I guess he got jealous. I don't know. And he approached him and, he was telling him, you got to bring that pack in for me. And he said no. And next thing you know, an anonymous letter goes into the sergeant, and the dudes start coming into the prison, right, the officer. And then that day, they had the search team there. So they have the dogs in the dogs. They have everyone there. You have to get out of your car. They pat you down, whatever. So they have the car, the dogs, and the dogs going around the car. And it hits on the passenger side of the car. So it hits on the car, and the guy, I forgot, I think it was the sergeant or the captain, asked the officer, "Hey, do you mind if I go in here and look?" And he's like, "Yeah, man, I don't have anything to hide. Go ahead and look." So they look underneath the seat. They don't find anything. And then the seat had, it opened up like that. It had like a little compartment where you could just store stuff. And he opened it up. There's nothing. There was nothing there. So they didn't find anything, but the dog hit on it. And since they had that anonymous letter where that inmate was saying, "Yo, this officer is bringing this in it." So, they searched the other dude's cell, the one that was getting the stuff. And in the toilet, they found the cell phone broken up, SIM card taken out. They found tobacco in the saran wrap, like ready to sell, and some rolls. They just found a whole bunch of stuff, and that was enough evidence to go ahead and not bring charges, just question the officer. And they start questioning the officer, and he says, I don't know what you're talking about. And then they're like, these inmates saying this, and that. Eventually, that officer has to go for a drug test. Because once you're under investigation, you have to go for a drug test. So he goes for a drug test, and they suspend him kind of, but paid suspension until the drug test comes back. So it's about a week later, the drug test comes back, he passes. He doesn't do anything. He's a straightforward guy. So that inmate basically was told on him because he wouldn't bring him anything. And it was just a crazy situation, man.
And it was interesting because you knew this officer who was doing this, and you thought that it was crazy. I remember you were sharing this with me. You thought that it was crazy he even got involved in this in the first place because of the fact that, wasn't he dealing with some pretty crazy individuals in the prison where he was at?
Yeah. He was a high-ranking Mexican drug dealer. Yeah. He was a high-ranking dude, the inmate that he was messing with. But that officer, I never thought he was a straightforward guy. You know what I mean? Like, he was clean cut, and this is all alleged stuff. So from what the inmates were saying,
with what you share right there, it almost kind of shows you just how easy an officer can get wrapped up in bringing in the contraband, bringing in the pack. Was there ever a situation where you were approached by prisoners asking if you would be willing to do so, or even threatening you to do so?
They never threatened me saying, oh, you have to bring this in or we're going to mess you up or stuff like that. But a couple times, actually, I think it was like 2 or 3 times, it was the younger inmates. It wasn't ever the older inmates. It was always the young cats. The young cats are always the ones that bring trouble, always trying to start fights. They have something to prove for some reason. But I remember this one time I was in, I forgot what dorm I was in, but I was in C block. And then the guy's like, yo, I was going to say my last name. All right. So he's like, hey, I want to speak with you real quick. And I was like, what's up? So we get to talking. We were just BSing at first, shooting it. And then he's like, listen, man, how about you bring in that pack for me? And I was like, what'd you say to me? And he just looks at me. He's like, man, we both can make some money. I was like, you're tripping right now, man. You're bugging. I was like, I ain't getting caught up in that. I was like, I'm going to let this one slide, but next time I'm going to put it on paper. And then put it on paper means write them up.
And obviously that is a situation where if they approach you and you don't write them up for that, or they don't get in any trouble, they might even feel like they got some wiggle room with you. Oh, well, he ain't put it out there that I asked him. And you said that wasn't the only time that happened. You said it actually happened a couple of times.
Yeah. This other time, it was actually interesting. I was in the dorm. It's an open dorm situation. It wasn't cells. It was an open dorm. So I'm sitting at the podium, and the TV's over here, and then the bunks are over there. The day room's right there, and the beds are over there. So I'm sitting there just BSing and talking to a few guys or whatever and watching. And then this one dude, his story is crazy. He had one arm, but he only had up to the elbow. That's all he had on either the left or the right arm. So I was like, hey, man, what happened to your arm? And he's like, man, I got wasted one day, got in an accident, I lost it. And I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then he's like, you smoke cigarettes? I was like, yeah, why does it matter? He goes, how much would it cost for you to bring in a pack of Newport 100s for me? And I just looked at him crazy, like, nah, I'm not doing that. And then he wouldn't drop it. He was like, yeah, man, just bring it in. And then that's when I put it on paper. And then I went to my sergeant. I told him what happened. And I was like, there's a problem, though, Sarge. He's like, wow. I was like, the dude's only got one arm. How are we going to cuff him up? And he's like, here, I'll show you. So he cuffs him. He takes one handcuff, puts it on his arm, puts it behind his back, puts it around the belt loop. Because he has a nub. You can't do nothing.
So he's handcuffed around the back to his belt.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah. And then just like little incidents like that here and there.
You know, you were mentioning like putting it on paper, and that was a situation where you had to write him up, and that guy went to the hole for that. You know, how often did you find yourself writing charges? Were you a guard that was constantly pushing the paperwork, or, you know, you were trying to avoid the paperwork to some degree?
Well, I'll put it like this. Like I told you, when I first started, I was by the book, 100% by the book. So when I first started, man, paperwork, not every day. I was writing a lot of people up just because, you know, when you first started a new job, you know, you want to make a good impression. You want to make sure, you want to let everyone know that you're doing a good job. And it's not trying to be like, oh, I'm trying to earn my stripes or anything. It's just you're doing your job. But like I told you, the more experience you get, you realize you can let certain things slide and whatnot, and little things here and there. So at first, yeah, I was putting a lot of paperwork on people. But after time went on, I started letting things slide more often. And then there's also different ways you could handle situations. Like, let's say me and another inmate have words. And he's like, oh, Rodriguez, you know, if we were on the outside, it'd be different. And technically, that's threatening somebody.
Yeah.
You could either write him up or, you know, just talk to him and just be like, you know, man, what you're doing is not right, so and so and so and so. You could handle it just talking to him or writing him up. The more I was there, the less paperwork I did, because paperwork is crazy, man. It's a lot of paperwork. But it's funny because there's true rotations. Well, you know, there's A rotation and B rotation. Let's say if I work Monday, Tuesday, I'm off Wednesday, Thursday, and on Wednesday, Thursday is a different rotation. So I was on B rotation. A rotation was the stricter, more I am the perfect officer type of officer.
Right.
That's what they type.
You would be a guard for almost 2 years. You shared some interesting things with me during the phone calls, and that was, you know, you had gotten in some trouble in your past, and I didn't honestly, you know, I never knew that if you got in trouble that you could actually be a correctional officer. But talk to us a little bit about your youth and the trouble that you got into.
I was 16, 17, around that age, anywhere from 15 to 17, because I went and did time at it. I got out when I was 18. So I got charges. It was assault with a deadly weapon with intent to cause physical harm, gang assault with a deadly weapon, and regular gang assault, all be violent felonies, which, you know, carry a wicked amount of time. And it was me. The reason they said gang assault is because it was 2 or more people. It's not like I'm a gang member or anything like that. It was because it was 2 or more people. So it was about 3 or 5 of my friends and 4, maybe 3 to 4 of those kids, and we got in a fight, and one of the kids ended up getting seriously hurt. So what ended up happening to the other kid, he got a broken nose, a broken cheekbone, eye socket, and jaw. He ended up having to get facial reconstructive surgery and plastic surgery to fix up all the damages. So I actually get arrested May 5th in school. I was still in high school. And we get arrested. I go to court for a couple of years, like 2, maybe almost 3 years. And I got 2 lawyers. You know, my bail was $5,000 cash. You know how it is. And I ended up copping a plea because their first plea that they gave me was 15 years, and I wasn't about to do that. There was no way I was going to do that. And then I was going to go to trial, and then they were like, the reason I was going to go to trial was because they offered me 3 years, and I didn't want to do 3 years in prison. So then I go and I say, me and my lawyers talk. They're like, listen, this is what they're offering, 3 years and then supervision afterwards. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that much time, you know. So he's like, are you willing to testify? And I was like, no, I'm not going to testify on anyone. I'm not going to say anything to get anyone else in trouble, especially because one of the kids, my best friend, he passed away. He wasn't even at the fight, and they said that he was. So the whole time, me and my buddy were saying, yo, this kid wasn't there. He was never there the whole time. So what ended up happening was right before we go on trial, I actually paid my lawyers. One of my parents paid the lawyers to go to trial. And then they're like, oh, hold on. They just came up with a plea. And I was like, what is it? They're like 21 days and 5 years probation. And I was like, yeah, I'll do that. 21 days is nothing. Because that's what's considered a month in county time, 21 days. So I do the 21 days and I do the 5 years probation, but I get off early on good behavior. I ended up doing like 3 years and maybe 6 months on probation. and I get YO, which, well, you know, but some people don't know. It's a youthful offender adjudication, which means it doesn't show up on your record because when you committed the crime, you were a minor. So it didn't show up on my record at all whatsoever. And the crazy thing is, I ended up copping out to attempted petty assault, which is pretty good considering the charges. They dropped all the charges, and then I pled guilty to attempted petty assault. And then the kid's family tried suing me and my family for all the medical bills, everything. They actually tried suing me for $1 million, which is crazy.
You know, it's crazy to think that they were offering you 15 years and that would just work its way down to the 21 days that you would end up serving and then the 5 years of probation. So you got blessed in that deal. And like you had mentioned, you know, being there was the YO, the youthful offender, it didn't show up on your record, and that was how you were able to become a correctional officer, because had that shown up on your record, you never would have been a correctional officer.
No, not at all.
You would be a guard for 2 years, and in that time you would see so much crazy stuff. And just, you know, I asked you this yesterday, and I want to ask you this again on this video, and that is, you know, I guess it makes more sense hearing what you've been through, but, you know, did you go into this with any kind of a stigma that, you know, everybody in prison is a bad person? And then when you got there, did that change? Like, what was your mentality going into this job, and how, if at all, would it change throughout the course of you being a guard?
All right, so when I first went in, like I told you, I did very little bit of time. So I had an idea of what it was going to be like on the inside, but I only had the point of view as the inmate, not the officer. So I go in there, and my first day, like I told you, there was a fight. And yeah, I knew there was going to be some bad people in there because they got themselves in that situation for a bad reason. They're not selling Girl Scout cookies, you know? They're not out there selling Bibles. They did something to break the law and get themselves in that situation. So I knew there was going to be bad people. But there's also some people who are in there just because situations are messed up. Like, I'll tell you real quick. I told you yesterday, but there was this cat. You have to be 21 to be in a state facility. So he was already 21. He didn't have much time left on his sentence. He was with this girl. She was 16 or 15 or 16, and he was 17. The minute he turned 18, the parents of the girl called the law on him because he was black and she was white, and they got him for rape. Well, statutory rape, and he has to register as a sex offender and all this crazy stuff. And, you know, when you see that, it's like, did the justice system fail that guy? Like, I think it did, because it's a couple of years. I mean, we've all been in that situation where you're dating a younger girl or you're a guy dating an older girl, you know? Everyone's been in those type of situations. It literally could happen to anybody.
Cesar, I don't want to make this super long, so I want to get close to wrapping this up. And one thing I want to ask you before we get to that point is, what would ultimately be the reason why you would only be a guard for 2 years? Come on now.
I hate you.
It's not a bad reason. I mean, it could have been for anything. It could have been something bad, but in your case, it's not.
Okay, so there was a lot of factors, not just that one thing I told you. But being that situation with the other officer and the contraband, I was staying with him, but not at the time that everything went down. So my name got brought up in the investigation, and I got put on their investigation, and a few other people got put on their investigation. The sergeant even got put on the investigation because we were all hanging out and stuff. But I mostly came back for a girl, which it didn't work out whatsoever. So that's that, Joe. I know that's what you want to hear.
Hey, it ain't a bad thing. You know, you were a guard down in North Carolina, and you would ultimately go to where you are now up in New York because of a girl. Yeah. It didn't work out like you had said. You know, I'm really sorry to hear that. But what are you doing now in life?
The alarm goes off. But no, yeah, I do cable for a living now for a company. And yeah, it's working out pretty good. I mean, the pay is pretty decent for New York. So it's working out pretty good now.
Well, Cesar, look, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us here on After Prison Show. And I really appreciate having you as a part of After Prison Show, even more so now, getting a chance to do this video. As we wrap this up, you know, is there anything that you would like to say in closing?
Nah, man, it's just like, if anytime you want to have me back to share some crazy stories, man, I got stories for days just like you do. And I mean, over canteen, people fighting over canteen. There was this one dude who would walk around talking to this imaginary person who wasn't there. And I mean, there was this one dude who stayed in the wheelchair the whole time because he was suing the state, and he made people push him around. This blind dude. It was crazy, crazy stories, man. There's a shower story. If you don't, we'll save that for a different day.
Let's definitely save it. Look, you got my wheels turning now. I'm definitely eager to hear these stories. Cesar, I want to thank you and your cat in the background for taking the time to do this interview with us. Your cat looks just like my cat, Aggie. Dude, you're an awesome dude. You got a really good head on your shoulders and an awesome look, like an outlook on life, and just an awesome personality. And it's a real pleasure to get a chance to connect with you, especially getting a chance to do this video. And I'm going to look forward to talking with you again real soon.
Yeah, Joe, I appreciate everything you do, and thank you for the time. And definitely got to link back up, man. And be safe over there.
Definitely. I'll talk to you later.
All right, later, man.